Good morning. Thank you for coming and demonstrating this debate for my class. We're going to start with the affirmatives constructive speech, which is a 5-minute speech. Michael, anytime you're ready.
Okay, before we get started, I just wanted to take the time to thank you, Francesca, for organizing this, and thank you, Cameron, for getting up nice and early. Now, with that, let's get into the actual topic for today. Reforming legal immigration into the United States would be desirable. Now, some resolutional analysis. The definitions for today's debate are going to be pretty contextual, so we won't need to define any terms. Second, because of the evaluative term desirable, this is a value proposition, and I am setting the value as the well-being of American residents. Lastly, the criteria, therefore, is that if I prove reforming legal immigration increases the well-being of American residents, you'll be voting aft today. Some background into the issue. In February of 2020, President Trump changed the public charge rule, barring legal entry into the United States if a person is likely to receive government benefits. The updated rule expands the list of relevant public benefits to include Medicaid, nutrition assistance, and housing assistance. Reforming immigration to rescind this rule would increase the well-being of American residents. Contention 1, health. Subpoint A is that the public charge rule means immigrants lose health care and women lose reproductive health services, according to the Guttmacher Institute as of February 4th, 2020. Medicaid is the central U.S. program for ensuring that people with low incomes have coverage and access to reproductive health care. Immigrant women will be less likely to receive preventative services such as Pap tests and hepatitis B vaccinations, as well as mammograms. The public charge rule contradicts Medicaid's central objective to provide coverage of and access to needed healthcare services. This problem is heightened for immigrants because they are more likely to have low incomes and work in industries that seldom offer health coverage. Subpoint B is how exactly this would affect people, where the Center on Budget Policy and Priorities on May 1st, 2018 outlines the long-lasting effects. The proposed rule could convince immigrants to forego health coverage or nutrition assistance for themselves or for their infants, preschoolers, and school-aged children. The results could include pregnant women who lose access to pregnancy-related services, families that choose not to enroll babies and young children in Medicaid or CHIP, pregnant and postpartum women and young children who choose not to enroll in WIC, and school-aged children who go to school without the health coverage and food assistance they need to succeed. In these cases, the result could be higher rates of poor birth outcomes, including higher rates of infant and maternal mortality, as well as poor health, education, and financial outcomes for children of all ages. The harm would certainly be acute for pregnant women and young children, and the young children affected would typically be citizen children, who may lose access to better health, greater educational attainment, and brighter future earning prospects. Subpoint C is that the reform that repeals public charge rule is desirable. Reforming immigration would allow legal immigrants to access Medicaid and other services for themselves and their families without risking their legal immigration status, which increases the well-being of residents. Contention 2 is the economy. Subpoint A, as PBS on January 29th, 2020 says, the public charge rule is essentially a wealth test. They're cited as saying, it's the administration saying, let's get as close as we can to the 1924 Act that restricted immigration from everywhere but Northern Europe. Factors that could potentially hurt an immigrant's chances at a green card include not having an income that is 250% above the poverty line, not having private health insurance, not being a full-time student, or employed, or not speaking English proficiently. Subpoint B, as the New American Economy on October 14th says, are the impacts, which the public charge rule change will cost the United States billions of dollars. 3.9 million immigrants will be affected by the changes to the public charge rule. The nation's economy would lose about $82 billion per year. That number includes $48 billion the affected immigrants would earn in income each year, plus an estimated $34 billion that would otherwise be generated because the money they spend in the US economy and the amount they would pay in taxes. The rule change will have a destabilizing effect for several major industries in particular, including hospitality, recreation, and food services. Professional and business services are included as well. Trade, transportation, manufacturing, and construction would also be impacted, which total over 1.3 million people who would be affected. Additionally, more than 222,000 immigrant entrepreneurs would likely be affected by the rule change, hurting businesses across the country and limiting employment opportunities for American workers. Subpoint C is how exactly this would be solved if you were to vote F. Especially coming out of a pandemic, jobs and tax revenue are not only desirable, but essential to the well-being of American residents. A reform of immigration that repeals the rule allowing legal immigration to continue as usual, providing labor and tax revenue for the United States, would increase the well-being of American residents. With that, I conclude my speech.
Thank you very much. Very nice. We now entertain a 6-minute speech from the negative speaker, who is Cameron. Cameron, anytime you're ready, let us know if you're going case or off case first.
All right. Well, thank you for being here today, and thank you for waking up so early to do this. I will be starting very briefly off case, and then going on to case to answer to the previous arguments. With that, let us begin. Counter contention 1, black incarceration. Point A is more immigration hurts African American employment, from Politico, September 2016. When the supply of workers goes up, the price that firms have to pay to hire workers goes down. Wage trends over the past half century suggest that 10% increase in the number of workers with a particular set of skills probably lowers the wage of that group by at least 3%. Both low and high skill natives are affected by the influx of immigrants. But because a disproportionate percentage of immigrants have few skills, it is low-skilled American workers, including many blacks and Hispanics, to quote, who have suffered most from this wage dip. The monetary loss is sizable. As a result, the earnings of this particularly vulnerable group dropped between $800 and $1,500 each year per person. B, the public charge rule limits low-skilled immigration. Reforming immigration to repeal the rule will increase low-skilled immigration. C, unemployment caused by immigration pushes African American men into prison. The National Bureau of Economic Research, May 2007. Immigration has more far-reaching consequences than merely depressing wages and lowering employment rates for low-skilled African Americans, males. Its effects also appear to push some would-be workers into crime and later into prison. Immigration causes wages and employment to fall for black workers. When this happens, some of those workers, especially those with the lowest skills, turn to crime to increase their income. As immigration began to increase, beginning in the 1980s, so did the institutionalization of low-skilled black men. In 1980, it was just 1.3%. By 2000, it was skyrocketed to 25.1%. When we talk about 1.5 million missing African American men, we are talking about missing husbands, missing fathers, missing brothers. Researchers have made a compelling case that when fathers go to prison, their absence takes a toll on their kids. Boys, especially, have more behavioral problems, including aggressive acting out and lower educational achievement. Anything that pushes black men into prison is not desirable and does not increase the well-being of American residents, which is the F value. Now to go on to case. On contention one major point is that the entire plan would take a major point away from Biden, from the American Bazaar, July 2020. In what would be music to Indian ears, presumptive Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden has vowed to end the countrywide green card caps and increase the number of H-1B visas, accusing his Republican rival President Donald Trump of waging an unrelenting assault on our values and our history as the nation of immigrants. Former Vice President campaign says it's wrong and it stops when Joe Biden is elected president. Electing Biden would increase the well-being of American residents, as he will guarantee health care for all and would better handle coronavirus than Donald Trump. On top of this, to address some more individual points, under subsection A of contention 1, when they said that the public charge rule means that immigrants lose health. On section B, where they say that it could have a major impact, the probability of this is low. It is not an assured thing. This is not something that we are assured to see in the future. This is merely a chance. So weigh that when you're deciding this round. Would you want a chance of something happening, or do you want something that necessarily will, meaning the further disenfranchisement of Black American males and their families? On C, they said that the reform that repeals public charge rule is desirable because it allows access to these different services. While it allows access to these services, it also puts a large weight on these services. It puts a large drain on these services. And so increasing the amount of immigrants relying on these services will also increase the amount of debt we're taking from those services. It decreases the amount that we're able to put into these services to help the average person, and it decreases the net good each individual person gets from these services, because the total amount of money they're putting into the economy doesn't amount for as much as they would be taking out of it, as they are indeed, if they are indeed taking part in these public health services. At least not what we have. Well, we don't have some large institutionalized healthcare system like Joe Biden would pass from my earlier card. On contention 2, a small note to make, that new public charge would not decrease overall immigration. It is from the Center of Immigration Studies 2019, it is highly unlikely that the rule will have a significant or notable effect on the total number of immigrants admitted, which is about 1 million per year. Nearly half of the immigrants are admitted in categories with preset quotas that have long waiting lists of applicants. If an applicant in one or more of these categories is denied on public charge grounds, then the next person in line who is qualified will take their place. There is no decrease on immigration, so contention 2 is utterly moot. There will not be a decrease of so if and when the new charge rule goes into effect, there will not be a decrease in immigration. So contention 2 doesn't do anything. However, if the charge rule is completely repealed, there will be the drain on the economy. There will be a drain on these resources, and we will see a drain on the lives and livelihood of American citizens, people who are already here and already deserve our money and time. And with that, I yield the floor.
Thank you very much. Very nice. So the affirmative gets 2 rebuttals, each for 2 minutes. The negative gets just 1 rebuttal for 3 minutes. So we will now entertain the first of 2 rebuttals from the affirmative speaker for 2 minutes. You're muted.
Okay, I'll be starting with the off case, and then if I have time, I'll move back to bolstering my case. But that 2 minutes starts now. Okay, on counter contention 1 about Black incarceration, where they essentially try to tell you that this would push more African American men into prison, I have 2 responses on their first subpoint. First, if stagnant or decreasing wages are the problem as you outline, how do you explain the distribution of wealth in this country and then blame immigrants who contribute more than $90 billion a year in taxes? Clearly, the problem is at the top, not at the bottom. My next response is that the Hamilton Project at the Brookings Institute found in 2018 that monopsony power and the ability of executives at huge corporations to take a profit at employees' expense is the real factor contributing to waning paychecks, not immigrants. Second, on their subpoint B about it pushing more African American men into prison, the card is from 2007 and is another iteration of an old Trumpian narrative that has been debunked time and again. About 3/4 of adults, according to Pew Research in 2020, found that, or say that undocumented immigrants mostly fill jobs that US citizens do not want. My second response is that the Associated Press actually just fact-checked this claim, saying that Trump plays on immigration myths. If you're truly caring about Black employment rates, you would be on board with policies and narratives that dispel myths that you circulate and that would be in support of policies and narratives that minorities and white Americans are on equal footing. Rather, you play the role of the protector and use outdated myths. 3, my third response, immigrants pay more than, again, $90 billion a year in taxes and only receive $5 billion a year in welfare. Without their contributions to the public treasury, the economy would suffer enormous losses, according to the ACLU on January 9th, 2020. Clearly more relevant than a 2007 card. Next, on contention 2, now, with that, let's look at the actual case, where they say that on subpoint A, a plan would take key issue away from Biden, but that's not an argument not to do this. It's simply an argument not to do it now. So clearly, they still agree that there is a reason to do it.
And that is time. Thank you very much. So now the negative speaker, Cameron, gets the only rebuttal for the negative, which is for 3 minutes. And I'm ready whenever you are, Cameron.
All right, I'm going to address the arguments off case and then go back to on case. Starting time. All right, so when the affirmative says that the main issue is the distribution of wealth and the exploitation of corporate means. This does not explain away the direct link, time-based link between the decrease in wages and the disenfranchisement of Black Americans and time going on. From 1980 to 2000, there is a incredible disparity here. No matter what the issue is, this cannot be unaffected. This must be at least some part of the situation. Yes, perhaps the wealth disparity is part of it. Yes, perhaps the exploitation of corporate wages is a part of it. But neither of those are the focus of this debate. The focus of this debate is immigration, and immigration does play a part, at least some of a part. It may not be the only deciding factor, but it is a deciding factor. He also said that it was debunked by a fact-checking organization, but I do not believe actually quoted from them. So if I am misconstruing that, then that is my bad, and you may drop this portion of the contention. When on point C, where he says that immigrants pay 90 billion and only take, what was it, 5 million, something, a far less amount. This does not also include things like the total loss that from the economy that these people take from taking jobs that other people don't want. Yes, they majority take jobs that Americans will not do. They do not only take jobs that Americans will not do. On case, his only real counter to my response to contention 1 is that it's not a reason to not do it, is a reason to not do it now. Yes, however, we are also talking about this in a timely fashion. He used a time-based argument for why my facts do no longer matter in 2007. By the time that we get into the next presidency, how many of the things we are discussing now will no longer matter as well. This discussion is time-based. Let's talk about it in the present. And so in the present, we should not do this. In the present, this should not be done. And also in the future, let's say Joe Biden gets into office, because this doesn't pass during his presidency, this won't be necessary anymore, because a universal health care plan will assuredly be passed, which was not answered to. As far as this debate goes, a healthcare plan will be passed if Joe Biden gets into office. So with that borne in mind, this plan will no longer be necessary in that case, because things like, as he points out, privatized healthcare will no longer need to be a weighing issue for whether or not someone gets into the country. On point 2, economy, he did not respond to any of the things we said. So as far as we can tell, point 2 is moot at this point for the rest of the debate. Please, so for the rest of this, focus on contention 1 and how they are losing, and focus on my counter contention and how we are winning on some of those points. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you very much. So the final 2-minute rebuttal now goes to the affirmative speaker.
Okay, I will start on case and then off case. All right, starting time now. Again, with this argument about Vice President Biden's campaign and how it might take away support for him, I'd have to argue that as a value round today instead of a policy, I'm not defending a specific time frame for when a plan would be executed. Simply the fact that you've just admitted in your case that it's a good thing, that in one fashion or another, it would be beneficial. So that said, as an evaluative round, we'd have to err towards the side of the AF because the neg agrees with us. Now on contention 2, where the water starts to get a little muddy, I'd have to clarify that we are not defending this idea that, or we don't have to gain access to a decline in immigration. Rather, that the crux of the argument is that public charge rule hurts immigrants who are already here just as much as it seeks to slow immigration. This is because, as the Migration Policy Institute in March 2020 notes, with many people confused about which benefit programs and populations are considered under the new public charge determination and fearful what rules could change at some point, they make earlier use of benefits disqualifying. When you, even because of a perceptual shift, keep entire communities away from necessary benefits during a pandemic, our link stands. That's how you destabilize entire sectors of the economy, like I mentioned during my first speech. So even if we're not seeing a total decrease or any decrease at all in immigration, we're still completely disrupting the economy. Now, back onto their case on counter contention 1, I've given 5 sources, many of which are field contextual and relevant experts in their respective fields. So they don't even bring up the issue of immigrants because they know it to be a non-issue. Because again, extending my warrantation about the ACLU's findings that they contribute more than $90 billion a year and hold up entire sectors at the same time only taking away $5 billion in resources, you have to vote aft.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Let me end the recording. I'm sure my students will be grateful.